What's good, everyone? This your main correspondent, Alan Taylor, and I'm back in the broadcast room yet again, always with another one. And yes, indeed, it is another one. So we got a situation here, and apparently, let's see, David Packman had a sit down with Dr. Phil. Now, we just recently seen Dr. Phil on the raids with Tom Homan. And we saw the video of him asking the I guess the dude from Thailand or whatever some questions about being here. And allegedly they had this man on serious charges of doing egregious things to underage people. So we're about to go here now, and I think this was made some months back, this interview here. But we're going to go here now, and we're going to check this out. Quarters, nickels, and dimes, people.
Today, we'll be speaking with Phil McGraw, also known as Dr. Phil, host of Dr. Phil Prime Time on Merritt Street Media, and author of the new book, We've Got Issues, How You Can Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity. You know, I'm very interested to speak to you today because in preparation for our interview, I've been watching some of the Fox News appearances, looking at the book, etc. I never really saw you as a guy who delved into political issues per se. You seem more willing, interested, and I must say, maybe more conservative than I thought you were. Is that a fair assessment?
Not at all.
Okay.
Because I am so not political, you can't even believe it. And I'll tell you why. I know nothing about politics. And I know why you say that. It sounds like it.
Right.
I talk about these things as cultural issues from a psychological, psychosocial standpoint, how they affect families and people. And they do overlap with some of the things that politicians talk about, but they talk about it from a political standpoint, funding standpoint, how they can get this bill or that bill through. Couldn't care less. But I am interested in those issues in terms of how they impact families in their day-to-day pursuit of life and peace and being able to raise their family in a healthy environment. So there's a lot of overlap, but I don't talk about it from a political standpoint because I frankly don't know enough about the politics of it all.
That's
I'm just willing to admit that. I'm just willing to admit it. I don't think a lot of other people know either. I'm just willing to admit it.
I don't want to make this like, famously there's a story of literary critics were talking about the symbolism in Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, and he would tell them, that's not at all what I meant. And so I don't want to make this where I tell you about how political all the stuff you say is, but the reason why I say it is a lot of the language in the book, and when you talk about issues like immigration and culture and others, it seems as though it alludes to going back to the good old days, individual decisions in the style that many Republicans now talk about with regard to schooling and parenting, et cetera. But you're saying it's just not the case.
So, I mean, listen, look, what is he saying though? What is this gentleman saying here? Hold on. What is he saying? Individual, and then you want to talk about parenting. Yes, your children are your children. And the way that the culture used to go is, you know what I'm saying? Now, we did have a community that kind of had a mutual agreement on a lot of things in the culture. And yes, most people, were raised with a moral standard that certain things as a human being, morally, you ought not do, and things like that, which kind of did make the society a little bit better. Back in the day, you used to sleep with your doors unlocked. Now you can't. So it is a huge difference. It is a huge difference in the thought process of us as human beings on this planet now. So I don't understand what are you talking about. Yes, I want my children to know certain things, and certain things I don't want my children to know. And that's okay. As a parent, those are your children.
That many Republicans now talk about with regard to schooling and parenting, et cetera. But you're saying it's just not the case.
No, and that doesn't mean that there aren't politicians on both sides of the aisle that talk about these issues. But if you really think about raising a family in America, whether it's now or 50 years ago or 20 years down the road, we still have to keep our eye on what I think are core issues in America. And I think the backbone of America is the family unit. I really think that if we have strong families, if we have strong family values, and I think that our families in America, as you've heard me say and read me say, are under attack. And I think some of those attacks are unintended consequences of technology, for example. But these are things that, whether politicians talked about them or not, if they tried to legislate about them or not, I would still be talking about.
So give some examples of that. What are some of the attacks facing families?
Well, I think about 08, 09, we had what I think has been the biggest change to human life since the Industrial Revolution. I think before the Industrial Revolution, we were a very agricultural civilization, right? People worked on the farms. We grew what we needed. But then we became mechanized. And I think back then we were 95% agricultural. Now we're 1% agricultural. Why? Because everything is so mechanized and people move to the cities and all. Well, the biggest thing that's happened since then, in my opinion, was the advent of the smartphone. The internet became so prolific. And I mean, think about it. We're walking around in 08, 09 with as much computing power in our hands with smartphones, laptops, iPads, that we had when we did the moon shot. When we put a man on the moon, we didn't have as much computing power as we can hold in our hands as of 08, 09, and it changed everything.
And I definitely agree with that. Listen, look, like I say, you guys know my age and things like that. I do remember a time when cell phones, you couldn't even send a text message on a cell phone. And then they progressed into where you could send a text message, but it took damn near 30 minutes just to send a decent sentence, because you had to, you had to scroll up, hit a letter, scroll the next, then hit another letter on the pad on a different number. And it was crazy. It was ridiculous to send a text message. And it was, at that point, it was, really troublesome to even try to send a text message. You just still would call somebody. But yeah, though, technology did change our thought process, the way that we live, our movement in life, information that we gather, things like that. And it also kind of, to a degree, like I definitely agree, like it kind of, destroyed the family unit to a certain degree, because, certain information that families needed wasn't getting to the families. And then also the information that was not needed was getting to the families, which is also destroying the community.
And people stop being so involved with the reality of life and started getting involved in virtual life. And it's only gone more and more in that direction since that time. And also at that time, we started seeing the highest levels of anxiety, depression, and loneliness in young people since records were kept. And
I'm with you on this
changed.
one. I'm with you on this one. Jonathan Haidt has studied and written about this extensively. You and I are aligned on this one. What about the ones that fall under what you call the tyranny of the fringe? Because I don't think the smartphone example falls under that category, right?
No, that's why I say some of this is the unintended consequences of like technology. But then we've got some where we've got people that are just trying to change some of the core values in America, core values of family, trying to rewrite history. And we've got people that are coming in saying, well, we want to change history, want to change what kids are being taught in history, want to change biology, we want to change all of the things that we have for 100 years had empirical data to support.
But tell me more about, I don't want to gloss over this. I really want to understand this. Changing history. Okay, what was the history that used to be taught that now has been changed by the tyranny of the fringe?
Well, pick an area. We can talk about biology, where we have always had two sexes.
But what about
But
history?
now,
Just to pick history, not biology, because you said history, biology. What about history?
Folks, this is history.
Hold on, my bad. Hold on.
well, there's a lot.
Okay, so yeah, let's not talk about biology. Let's talk about history. But history does tie in with biology. I mean, and this is where it's at. This is where we're at here. And it's sad to see that we're at this point right now to where we can't face truth and facts about our history on this planet and everything else. This is crazy.
A lot of history to biology, and you would be missing a big point to pretend that there's not historical biology. But if you want to talk about history, we can, not in biology, but just talk about the history of mankind.
Yeah.
We've got areas where they don't want to talk about slavery. We had one a group of people that wanted to start describing slavery in history books as involuntary relocation.
Right.
This was not involuntary relocation. This was slavery. And
Right.
we've got people that are wanting to rename schools because people that were doing what were the mores and folkways of the times now would clearly be doing things against the law, certainly against mores and folkways, because they were slave owners at the time, are saying, well, now we have to tear down these statues, we have to rename these schools, and we don't want to teach about them. We have to learn from our mistakes as a society. We can't pretend those things didn't happen. They did happen. They were dark and ugly times in American history. We don't want to pretend those things weren't there.
So
Right. Listen, look. Right. And I'm gonna have this to say, and some people are gonna get mad. Some people may agree, some people may not. But listen, look. I don't want them tearing down any fucking statues, any history, none of that shit. And see, my thought process is that is the beginning of rewriting history. Now, we all know just some few years back, they started taking down statues and stuff like that of Confederate leaders, all types of things, stuff like that. They started taking down these statues and stuff like that and renaming places and all types of stuff. This is crazy. We should not do this. This is the beginning of rewriting history, which is bad. We always want to sit there out here and talk about, not actually having accurate accounts of history. We can't have accurate accounts if we keep tearing down history and putting other things up that is not a part of what those landmarks were. These are just facts here. I'm not in agreement with that. I don't care what y'all think. I'm definitely not. You know what I'm saying? Those Confederate statues, all that, leave that shit where it was at. Leave it where it was at. And I know nobody's gonna like this. Definitely a lot of black people. I know that certain black people, even certain white people, things like that. Just people, period. It's gonna be a segment of people that's not gonna like what I'm saying. But I'm telling the God's honest truth. Leave that shit in place. These are the things that will allow the situation and will allow people to change history. If we tear these monuments down, if we rename these schools, if we do these things to erase our past in this country, it's going to erase our future and also have us repeating the same stigma and the same things that we also had fought so hard, definitely as a country, black people, everybody, that we fought so hard to get out of and try to structure ourselves to be a better nation. I don't think we should have removed any statues at all. We should have left them Confederate statues where the fuck they were, things like that. Just not rename schools, things like that. That is the beginning. And see, listen, look, this is what's happening. The people that are so engaged in trying to rewrite history, they will protest and things like that to, you know, remove certain things and statues and all that type of stuff. And that's the beginning of it. That's the beginning of rewriting history. Now they'll give a few trinkets, and I'm gonna say this, and I mean it when I'm saying they'll give a few trinkets. Yeah, they'll take down the Confederate statues and all this other type of stuff. Okay, so let's take them down. What's going to be next? After they take them down, after so long of taking them down and things like that, what's going to be next? It's going to be the fact that what Dr. Field just said about slavery was involuntary. That's coming up next. Then after that, slavery didn't even exist. Some magical way, these people made their way over here and they wanted to pick that cotton. They wanted to do this. They wanted to do that. See, this is what I'm talking about right here. This is the start. If we start taking down these statues that keep us with a reminder of what truly happened, who the names were and things like that. It's just like with Thomas Jefferson sleeping with Jesus, I can't think of that lady's name. But she was one of his slaves. And there are descendants of Thomas Jefferson who are technically what we would call black people in today's society. Can we erase their history of Thomas Jefferson sleeping with man, I can't even think of that lady's name, but y'all know who she is. And this is what I'm talking about. That's the beginning of erasing the history in this country. It starts off small, removing a statue here, renaming a building here. It starts small. And then the next thing you know, 100 years from now, you know, all of a sudden, you know, it's a whole new history. And everybody got to dig so deep in order to find out the truth.
Let me see if I understand,
crazy.
because there's a bunch of stuff. So if I hear you correctly, you're not in agreement with those who want to minimize the tragedy and brutality of slavery, but you also want to keep the school names. If a school is named after a slave owner, you're also okay with that because it will remind us and we will learn from it. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think you're oversimplifying what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you're wanting to change American history to pretend that these people did not exist,
right,
and you want to measure them by today's yardstick rather than the yardstick at the time, that's what is referred to as presentism. And that's like saying, okay, you're going to drive through a neighborhood and the speed limit is 20. And you drive through that neighborhood doing 20. And then they come along and say, you know what, we're going to change the speed limit to 10, and we're going to give you a ticket for speeding when the speed limit was 20. It's now 10, but you weren't speeding when you were doing 20, but now it's 10. We're going to give you a retroactive ticket for doing what was acceptable at the time. That's called presentism. We're going to take what was done back at the time, pull it up into the current time,
right,
and condemn you for not knowing what was going to be acceptable 200 years later than when you did it. And I think that is really narcissistic and arrogant and rewriting history instead of letting people learn from the mistakes that were made in America and that we need to learn from so we don't make those mistakes again.
right. Hey,
So what the French toast is there to think about?
there we go. There we go. And it's just the truth. Yes. If you actually stop knowing the truth about you will repeat. We will repeat history if we don't have reminders of what happened. And like I said though, I'm pissing somebody off out there. I know I am. Especially by me being a black man. How dare you, Alan? How dare you? Don't you want those Confederate statues torn down? They enslaved us and they did this and that. They did true that. But that's the whole damn point. That we need to keep these things in place. You know what I'm saying? Just like when just like in every city, there's a Martin Luther King Drive or Avenue or something like that. We don't need to change that. We need to keep that in place for a reminder for future generations to keep that going. If we don't have reminders of what debauchery and stupidity and things like that happened in the past of this country, we will forget it. And these are just facts. We have to keep these things in place. I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not tripping. I know what happened. I'm a huge history buff. I love history. Regardless, right, wrong, ancient Greece, all that stuff. I love that. So, you know, I'm not sitting around here, you know, afraid to face the demons of the past. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to erase the demons of the past, but then too, we want to try to figure out a way to make it to have a future. And if we don't actually accept the demons of the past and keep trying to correct them, then we won't have a future. All we're going to have is a bunch of misplaced information that people are sitting around here not understanding what really went on, and a bunch of lies being told to everybody. And that's a huge problem for society. Definitely if this country plans on making it anywhere. We're not even in this country a true 600 years yet. Most civilizations in on the other side of the pond, they existed at least 1,000 years, some of them. We haven't even made it to the half point round here, but we already want to erase the past of this country when they don't erase the past of their country. You go to Greece over there, they still got statues of Alexander the Great standing up there. They still got statues of Caligula. They still got statues of all their emperors and stuff like that. You go to England, they got their people still standing there in statues and stuff to remind their people of what happened, whether it be good or bad. But it seems like to me over here, we just gun-ho to try to erase the situation that we've been in over here since America was so-called founded, or whatever you want to put the title upon it. And that's our problem over here in America. We want to always try to forget things. We want to always try to erase things that can't and should not be erased. And that's the reason why we having problems over here right now. We erasing families, we erasing structure, we erasing ourselves over here. And then we want to sit around here and complain all the time because shit don't go right financially, spiritually, and all other types of things. And that's that.
So what the French toast is there to think about?
But it is what it is, though. Shout out to all my subscribers. Mad love to y'all. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like, share, subscribe button. Make sure you ring that bell to be notified whenever I decide to post things. And like I always say,
and that, my friends, is the bottom line.
That, my friends, is the bottom line.